We get support from Audible. We've all got busy schedules. And I'm sure sometimes you feel like, with all the things you have to do, it's hard to find time for the stuff you love to do, like reading. That's why Audible is so great. Audible offers an incredible selection of audiobooks across every genre, from bestsellers and new releases to celebrity memoirs, mysteries and thrillers, motivation, wellness, business, and more. Plus, as an Audible member, you can choose one title a month to keep from their entire catalog, including the latest bestsellers and new releases. And also, I have to say, I love how the Audible app makes it easy to listen anytime, anywhere. When you're traveling, working out, walking, doing chores, wherever your day takes you. Cleaning the bathroom has really never been more fun. Let Audible help you discover new ways to laugh, be inspired, or be entertained. New members can try it free for 30 days. Visit audible.com/listening or text listening to 500-500. That's audible.com/listening or text listening to 500-500 to try Audible free for 30 days. Audible.com/listening.
I think we all have these areas of our life that make us feel stressed out or disorganized. And because we're so busy, we rarely stop and say, like, wait, am I doing this right?
From Offscript Media, I am Matthew Zachary, and this is Out of Patience. On the show today, I welcome one of my advocate heroes, Erin Zammett Ruddy, a young adult cancer survivor that I met during the Live Strong days in the early 2000s. This was back when she may have barely crossed the 5-year survivor finish line. That's what we called it back then, but she was and still is a huge force to be reckoned with. She was a big-time, big-city magazine journalist writing for Glamour when a random asymptomatic diagnosis of chronic myelogenous, lots of syllables, leukemia changed everything. She broke the mold, went public, something considered shocking for the time, and began a now legendary and award-winning column entitled Life with Cancer, making Erin one of the first media cancer celebrities of all time. There's so much to unpack with her. The least of things would be her choice to temporarily quit chemotherapy to become a biological mom, confronting her own sister's cancer diagnosis just 2 years after her own, maintaining her career, speaking all over the world, raising a shit ton of money for charity. You get the picture. Now a happily thriving 40-something raising 3 kids and married to the same man who stuck with her during the dark days, Erin's still here and kicking more ass than ever with her new book, The Little Book of Life Skills, Deal with Dinner, Manage Your Email, Make a Graceful Exit, and 152 other expert tricks. Guys, you're going to love this conversation. Enjoy the show. Erin Zammett Ruddy, welcome to the throwback DeLorean edition of Out of Patience, where we're going to go back in the time machine to the days of yore prior to, I don't know, all the crapness of social media, when things were simpler and we just plain old got shitty cancer. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. That is quite the introduction. I love it.
Now, for the listeners, we met a million years ago in the Mesozoic era when the word survivorship was kind of just a thing. And this idea of peer support and social support and we care about you as much as we care about your cancer was kind of just not really a thing. And I want to make sure that people listening realize we've come so far from the almost like the black and white TV days of the early 2000s. And as someone who was also diagnosed in his 20s, there's never a good time to get it, but there you were. Congratulations on being 23 with cancer.
Yeah, exactly.
So talk to us. Life before, how'd you find out this was chronic myelogenous multisyllable leukemia?
Yes, I was 23. I was working at Glamour magazine in New York City, kind of living this very cool, it looked cooler on paper, like living in an apartment in Manhattan, going to parties. I was making $0. I was living on like the parties I would go to, which again, sounds fun. And it was. So I had this very fun up and coming New York City magazine world life going on. And I went in for a checkup feeling totally fine, no symptoms whatsoever. And I went in and they called me back the next day. They had taken some blood. It was just my annual. And the doctor said, I think you need to come right back in right now. And he called me on the phone, which once you have cancer, it's very hard to remember what it was like before when doctors didn't call you on the phone.
Right,
you know?
right.
Like, we all speak to our doctors. I text with my doctors. I email with my doctors. But, pre-cancer, when you're just a regular person, like the doctor doesn't call you when he needs to recheck your blood, right?
It's never good news when he calls you.
So the fact that this guy called me, I was like, oh no, I guess I better go back in. Anyway, I went back in. Turns out that, my blood counts were all out of whack. And pretty quickly, fortunately for me, this guy who was just a regular primary care physician knew what he was talking about and could tell me what he thought it was right away. And I went and then went to Sloan Kettering and then went to, Oregon Health and Sciences University in Portland, but pretty quickly found out that I was diagnosed with chronic myelogenous leukemia, and that kicked all of that off when I was 23. And, living a completely normal life, feeling completely normal, had no symptoms. It was a very strange way to be diagnosed when you have absolutely no symptoms, nothing wrong with you.
Yeah, the no symptom thing is one thing, but did you I always have this conversation with people that have a blood cancer. Like, they don't use the word cancer in blood cancer. Leukemia doesn't really mean blood cancer. Did you have to ask, like, what the hell is this?
I actually, really, when I was in third grade, had a very completely unrelated, of course, blood condition for like a hot minute. And at that time, I had to have a bone marrow biopsy because they thought it might have been leukemia. So when he started talking about my blood counts and this and infection, but you don't have an infection, and why would your white blood cell count be 100,000? And, my mind immediately, I immediately was like, oh, I know this is leukemia. I just knew it. And I had a friend who at 18 had ALL. So I kind of had a little bit of a basic knowledge that what it was. And of course, leukemia is such a weird sounding word, but blood cancer, I think, sounds worse. I mean, cancer is the worst word, right? So, I pretty quickly knew what it was. But blood cancer just, and your blood's everywhere, right? That was the thing that I had to kind of wrap my head around, because it wasn't like it was a tumor that I could have cut out or radiated. It was, how do you get rid of something that's the very thing you need in your entire body? It's
one of the rare bonding things between blood cancer people and brain cancer people. Like, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
It's just there. Yeah. Can't get rid of your blood, can't get rid of your brain. It's just there.
Nope.
This alien body. So through this lens of young adult cancer, which of course is my universe and your universe back then, you were already with boyfriend, and you already had a job, and you were already in a place where you had like a sort of sense of structure, versus many of us who may have already still been in college or single or living with our parents. That was an odd advantage at the time that you didn't realize. You had Nick.
I did, yes. I had a boyfriend who was, great. I mean, he was 22, I think. I was 23. And I mean, we had no idea what we were doing. I still, though, my mom and dad still came with me to my appointments. I was like, it wasn't like Nick was escorting me to all of my appointments necessarily, because my parents, you still, when something like that happens, you still kind of lean on your parents, especially as a young adult. And I was fortunate that they lived nearby. But yeah, I remember years later, Nick told me, and he's now, spoiler alert, my husband, we've been married for 15 years and we have 3 kids. I hope I'm not spoiling anything.
It's all right. It's all good.
Interview over.
Yep.
But he later told me that my mom, like in those very early weeks, said to him, this is probably going to be a tough road. And I totally understand if you want to like hit the road and not be a part of this. And he was so insulted. He was like so insulted. And so was I. Nick and I had been together at that time already for like 2 or 3 years, I think. 2 years. We were solid. Like we were pretty solid. So the fact that she said that to him insulted him. But some people do it, some people can't, it's hard for a lot of couples. A lot of relationships break up. A lot of people don't make it through or they stay together because the person stayed with them during treatment. So I get it. But for me and Nick, it was if anything, it made our relationship stronger, and not for what you would think, not because, he helped me through. It was more like cancer made me less of a crazy person. It made me not be such a type A control freak lunatic about life and ambition and goals. I kind of was like, all right, I guess shit happens and I need to just kind of roll with it for a little while. And that made me, I guess, a better person.
I think the fact that your mom sort of took the fall for being the out clause deliverer and spared you that awkward conversation at some point in your relationship with Nick was a good thing to have.
Definitely. Yeah, I think you're right. She did the, but I mean, for him, I don't know. I guess, sometimes these things happen and I'm like, oh, I should probably be nicer to Nick. I should probably.
What do I owe him now?
I don't know. I mean, he was it was a non-issue for him. He never even batted an eye about it. So yeah, I guess I should be nicer to him.
One of the things I've always been fascinated by, because I had stepped into the cancer world years after you started your column about cancer in 2001, but was that the fact that you were willing to be public about it at a time when, I guess, in society, cancer wasn't like the whisper things that it was in the 80s and 90s, but it was a really big step, at least from my perspective, that you chose to go very public, working for Glamour, but having this column, the Erin's Got Cancer column, was a really big deal. Did you get a sense that that's what you would bring to the world by doing that? Or was it just like a knee-jerk, got to get this out therapy thing?
It was just who I am and how I approach all things private and potentially uncomfortable. I have to talk about them and I tell them to as many people as possible. It's just my way. So I guess there may have been a moment when I was diagnosed where I was like, am I not going to tell people this? But what didn't last long. I mean, I told my boss, I came back from that second appointment when they rechecked my blood and I was pushing the doctor. I was like, what could it be? What could it be? He's like, I really don't want to say anything. You should come back in 2 days. Once I have the blood back, bring your parents. And I was like, excuse me? I was like, what do you think it could be? And then he told me he thinks it could be leukemia. Anyway, I told my boss that very day. I was in her office. We were crying. And I don't know. I guess it's because I like to control the narrative and I don't really like other people guessing how I might be feeling or thinking poor Erin or any of that. So I wanted to get ahead of it. And then quickly it became something that was very, very cathartic. And it just enabled me to look at this whole cancer, every part of it through the lens of a journalist as well. And it became a story I was telling and living at the same time. But I didn't realize the impact it had until, I guess it was after the first column, which ran in 2002. I got quote unquote fan mail, but I got a letter from jail and I was like, oh my gosh, people are reading this. At that time, magazines were huge. There was millions and millions of readers and it was really cool. And then to see that I was helping people just by saying oh my gosh, this is what happened, literally just by sharing your story. And this obviously by now with everything you've done, just saying it helps somebody. Just so one person says, "Oh wow, I'm not alone." So it wasn't that what I was writing was all that profound. I think it was what was profound is the fact that I was writing it, that I was sharing it so publicly. But again, that's just who I am, and it came naturally to me, and it doesn't for a lot of people. My sister does not love to talk about her experience too much. She will, but she doesn't thrive on it or find it therapeutic like I do.
Right. And I wanted to get to the fact that, it's kind of ironic to say cancer is a disease of the family, but then your sister said, I'm jealous, I'm getting cancer too in 2003. My God, shock to the system, unexpected another. Was she also asymptomatic?
She was not. She was 7 months pregnant and had a rash all over her body, for much of the pregnancy. And, she'd gone to dermatologists, she'd gone to all these different places, and she didn't really know what it was about. And then she had a lump on her neck. And again, she was 27. So it's oh, you pulled a muscle, or oh, this, or oh, that. And, when you're pregnant, weird things happen. And as we all know from the young adult cancer world, people love to dismiss young adults who have weird things going on because, oh, you're young. It couldn't be X, Y, or Z. So she had the neck thing biopsied, and that's how they found out it was Hodgkin's lymphoma. And yeah, it was 18 months after I had been diagnosed. So it was crazy. And, I had CML, I have CML, and I was able to take Gleevec. So here I am popping a pill, essentially. Melissa gets Hodgkin's lymphoma and has to go through very intense chemo radiation while pregnant, have the baby early. So it was really, interesting to see, to watch what she was going through. And it again, just kind of like fueled my fire of like, I need to do whatever I can to share my story and to let people know that my life is being saved by a pill. I'm sitting here living a normal life, popping a pill while my sister is going, losing her hair, lived in Sloan Kettering for 6 weeks. But it was crazy to have the two of us in one family, that close together, that young, going through 2 blood cancers.
Yeah, I don't want to understate the fact that, for the listeners, it is 2020 as we are recording this particular show. And back then, yes, magazines were kind of all we had to indulge in. Glamour, obviously a phenomenal lifestyle magazine with a huge legacy. You had millions of people reading. Remember reading magazines? And you were able to channel all of this to reach millions of people. I love the cancer fan mail. I remember reading your column, I want to know this person, but you really were, and I've heard you referred to as this, the first literal cancer celebrity that wasn't a celebrity. And you didn't necessarily know what you were getting yourself into because this is innately who you are to be very open about this. But over the years, your column was read by millions of people. To the extent that you've been invited to speak and share your story and raise a fuck ton of awesome money to help incredible organizations do great shit. Where are you in the sense of today, married, 3 kids, 18, by the way, your blood cancer can vote right now, which is kind of a nice milestone if you think about it. I think my tumor can rent a Hertz car without ID, 25. Right. So we're in a place to really joke about this. But looking back at that legacy of old school print, really making that dent before the internet, what's your sense of how we communicate today with cancer and people sharing their stories? Because it's almost too easy to do that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I because of the format, I was able to edit and think and really be careful about what I was putting out there and what I was writing. And so ultimately, maybe it was a more, it somehow had each column I wrote. So I wrote the column for 10 years in the magazine, and each column, there were some sad parts and ups and downs, but it generally had a sense of hope, I think. And I mean, look at what's going on now, even during the pandemic, this stuff. If I were writing a blog right now, it would be super depressing,
Right.
I'm not just because I would probably spew constant things. And I think it would maybe be an information overload. And I think I'm grateful that I was diagnosed in a time when there wasn't that. I couldn't read every single person's personal blog about their journey with CML, because it might have affected how I came at it from my own point of view. Does that make sense? I don't know. I think it's so nice right now that there's so much information out there, but I think so much information has to be handled carefully, and you have to really resist the urge to read everything. Right? Does that make sense? I don't know. I think the magazines were just kind of lovely and a nice way to do it. And I wrote a blog as well, and that was fun. And that I think was more in real time, but I don't know. I'm very glad that I'm glad I'm not in high school right now with social media, or even middle school. I think coming up when we did was it was simpler times. It was simpler times.
Back with our guest after the break.
Has your chronic illness made it difficult to continue working in the traditional way? Want to learn how to find and create flexible remote work that both accommodates your chronic illness and generates an income? Join the Patients Getting Paid membership, a community of chronicpreneurs where people just like you find workshops and trainings, weekly updated condition-specific gigs, twice monthly coaching calls, co-workings, accountability, and the kindest community to support you on your path to make money while working from anywhere and taking good care of yourself. Learn more or join us at patientsgettingpaid.com.
We all struggle with feeling like there's not enough time in the day to be productive personally or professionally. We all struggle to make our time matter. It's time to take control. It's time to start investing in the corporation of you. At Athena, they've helped over 700 ambitious professionals achieve more by connecting them with best-in-class, globally remote executive assistants. Athena executive assistants go beyond basic administration tasks. They help you make time matter through the art of delegation. They believe delegation is the superpower of all highly successful people. And your personal EA will help you get there. Your EA is a one-on-one long-term partner to help you achieve your personal and professional goals. Take back your time. Join the waitlist at athenago.com. That's athenago.com.
So, Erin, here we are, years and years later after our skirt with death and what we went through, and we're now, I would say, the survivor graduates, so to speak. We have families, we have kids, we're adulting, which is a good problem to have when you're not dying from cancer, I suppose. Now you're in a place, you wrote a book. And I remember the episode of Sex and the City where Carrie wrote a book and she's in the taxi with the taxi. She's like, the taxi driver's like, you wrote a book? That's amazing. I'm in the same place. I could never write a book. What inspired you to write a book, and what did it take to write a book?
Well, I think so. I've been a magazine writer for 20 years, right? So I've been writing forever. And my job as a magazine journalist, editor, writer was to reach out to experts, get their best tips for, all sorts of things in lifestyle and bring it to the reader. But when I turned 40, I realized that, I had the kids, job, house, all of that, like on paper, I was fully adulting, but I still was not moving through my day and my life in an efficient way. I was like constantly shooting from the hip, feeling frazzled, feeling overwhelmed. I think we all have these areas of our life that make us feel stressed out or disorganized. And because we're so busy, we rarely stop and say like, wait, am I doing this right? Anyway, so I had this kind of moment where I was like, what if I just stopped and reached out to all these experts, because I am certainly no expert, and reached out to all these experts and found out how to do all these little things better. It was basically okay, Erin, it's time to, do these things correctly, talk to these people, get their information. But I did not want to have to overhaul my whole life, right? I didn't want to add anything to my to-do list. So I wanted to get really small, quick how-tos, streamlined, simplified from big-time experts. I wanted to talk to Bobby Flay about how to make a great burger, Ariana Huffington about how to take a nap or unplug, Hoda Kotb about how to start your day feeling positive. All these little things that I felt like if I could do those little things well, would have a big impact on my day and my life. And so I set out to write this book. My agent and I came up with a proposal. That was 2 years ago. And, it all went off. I just found out they're publishing it in Vietnam. I found that out today. So the book came out in September of 2020, and it's continuing to be published all over the world, which is really cool. And I'm just basically in the middle of launching a book during a pandemic, which is really fun.
Yeah, just a pandemic launching a book. So the book is called The Little Book of Life Skills, Deal with Dinner, Manage Your Email, Make a Graceful Exit, and 152 other expert tricks. I need to ask, is one of those tricks teaching your kids to clean up after themselves?
Actually, so if there's not a ton of parenting, but yes, one of the things is this idea of don't put it down, put it away. And it's just a simple mantra. You should try it with your kids this week. Honestly, it's like, instead of kicking your shoes off, put them in the closet. Instead of putting the dish in the sink, put it in the dishwasher. Close the loop. But with kids, the most important thing is making sure everything has a home so that they can put it in its home. So it might require spending a little time figuring out where all these things go and then having them close that loop. But yeah, don't put it down, put it away. I say it all the time. Ask my kids. I'm a real treat.
You may have just entirely changed my entire parenting skill dynamic just with that little, that is practical stuff. That is absolutely, that's a life skill. That's a little book of life skills kind of thing. I'm going to approve that recommendation. Thank you so much. My God. So wait, so you're going around interviewing all these incredibly notable, influential individuals and getting normal day-to-day life hacks that they would do, because they put their pants on just like everyone else, 1 foot at a time.
Absolutely. It was, it starts with how to wake up in the morning and it ends with how to go to bed, how to set yourself up for a good night's sleep. And it's like everything in between broken down into small doable things because I didn't want to get overwhelmed and I didn't want to overwhelm anyone. I knew that like we're all, whether, whatever stage of life we're in, everyone's busy. And this was before we were even in a pandemic, right? Now it's like nobody wants to add anything hard to their to-do list. So these are things like, little things that anyone can do, but they have such like what I just said, don't put it down, put it away. Or waking up in the morning and getting out into the sunlight first thing to stop the melatonin drip in your brain. That has changed everything for me.
Wow.
Because that groggy feeling you have in the morning, you need blue light to lift it. And there's blue light and sunlight. So go outside. And you also, this is creepy and crazy, you lose almost a liter of water in the humidity in your breath at night. So really the first thing you should do when you wake up is drink a glass of water just to get your body working again.
Did you interview anybody?
But it's just little things. Anyone can do that.
Did you interview anybody that gave you like the most oddly antithetical, unexpected response? You mentioned Bobby Flay. Like if he told you how to change a tire, would that have been something unexpected? Did that happen?
Yeah, Yes, no, but the only thing honestly unexpected that Bobby Flay said, we talked about burgers for 45 minutes. That was what was so cool about this book is I was talking to all these experts about the very thing that they are most passionate about, so we got to talk for a long time and then I had to condense it into 1 page of, step-by-step small tips. Bobby Flay's surprising thing was that he only likes American cheese on burgers. He thinks people go too highbrow with their cheeseburgers. And that American cheese is the classic for a reason. It reminds us of our childhood. It melts beautifully, and that people should stop trying too hard with their burgers. They should just use American cheese. But he talked a lot about other stuff. One of the things that I loved was my to-do list. My productivity expert, Nicole Lappin, was talking about procrastination. She said procrastination gets a bad rap, but in order to prioritize your day and to really be productive, you need to procrastinate. And it's about deciding what you're going to push to your list for tomorrow or push it to later or even delete it completely. Like don't put things on your to-do list that you're never going to do because they just taunt you and make you feel bad. Right. So I love that little like tip of like, step 1 to getting shit done is procrastinate, so, and deciding what it is you have to procrastinate. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting things in there that I learned that I didn't know. I mean, I learned so much. I reference this book every single day.
I want to talk to you about that moment I was reading in one of the pieces you wrote, like when you first held it in your hand. I wrote some CDs in the 90s and I holding them in my hand like, oh my God, I don't know what beating cancer means, but this is like my fuck you to cancer. I got these books in my hands. Then, I launched a nonprofit. I'm holding like this 501c3 certificate in my hand. Then whatever. And then I had kids. Like these are way better to hold in your hand than a CD, but you have kids and they have a book. What was it like for you to physically touch this, hold it in your hand and say, I did this?
It, I will tell you, is very, very cool. I love it. It makes me very happy. I'm proud of the book, which helps, like when you're doing anything, and music, whatever it is, like you work so hard on it, but you don't really know if you're going to like love it or if you're going to look back and be like, oh, I wish I should have done, I could have. Anyway, so I loved the book. I got the book. I hold it in my hand and it's actually, the trim size is pretty small. So it is like you can hold it in your hand. And I'm incredibly proud. I mean, not unfortunately, but the timing of it all has been very strange because I'm not out in the world. Every once in a while I go into a store with a mask, whatever. And someone might ask me a question and I say, oh yeah, I wrote a book. What's the book? And then they're like blown away. And I'm like, oh, can we sell it in our store? Like that just happened to me yesterday. And so I miss being out there because getting excited about something like in a vacuum is not as fun as like being out in the world and seeing people and getting to talk to people. So the pandemic book launch has been a little strange, but I have Instagram.
Right.
And Instagram brings me a tremendous amount of joy, I will tell you. And I do, as you follow me on Instagram, and hopefully everyone else will follow me who's listening. I post a lot about my book because it's exciting and it's crazy. And you don't often step back and say, holy shit, I wrote a book. I wrote this book and it's out there and people are writing about it and talking about it. And, so I try to, but it's like with anything, I think. How often do we just sit back and pat ourselves on the back and say, wow, we did a good job? We should do more of that. Certainly.
I love the corollary between starting out in print and then winding up on Instagram. It's such an amazing journey of how to do print, analog, and digital the right way on your terms. And I did want to ask you in terms of like, you know, here we are trying to figure out navigating cancer and almost dying. And now we're figuring out epic life hacks to make life suck less when you're not dying from cancer. How do you square that circle? Do you wake up in the morning and say, oh my God, what kind of 20 years has this been for me?
Yeah, you know, someone asked me at my book launch event if having cancer made me want to get my life in order, and if that sort of informed this choice of book. And I actually said, I think it was more that I had cancer at such a young age that I was basically like, I'm good. Like that's it, right? Like that was my cross to bear. So now I don't also have to learn how to like empty a dishwasher or like fold a fitted sheet, right? Like I kind of like the adulting piece was like, oh God, wait, I'm fine. I'm surviving. I have 3 kids and a house and a home and a job. Like I still also have to like adult and do all these things. So the cancer card that I played on, you know, on myself for a very long time, giving myself a break on certain things, you know, it's over. You and I, it's our past, right? Like it's been 19 years for me. So to look back on that sometimes, and when I meet new people, people are amazed. And what's happening now with the book is people are looking into me, you know, as if they're booking me as a guest, or if, you know, they're Googling me when they buy the book. And they're realizing, oh, you're that girl from Glamour magazine. Oh my goodness, I remember your column. I remember this, or I remember that. And that has been very cool. So the book putting me back in the spotlight. And anytime someone says, oh, I read your first book, I'm going to buy this. I always say, well, this one's a little more fun. Like this one, we talk about like how to open a bottle of wine, how to make a cheese board. I mean, there's lots of stuff in here, but we're not talking about cancer too much. So it feels really cool, right? It feels really like if I could look back on my 23, 24, 25-year-old self and say like, don't worry, you're going to do all this. You're going to pound the pavement and you're going to be that cancer girl who writes and talks about cancer. But someday you're going to be so lucky that you're going to be writing about so many other things that the cancer will be a footnote. Oh, she also wrote this book. Do you know what I mean? So it does feel very cool. But at the same time, I'm grateful that people are digging up that part of my story, because I don't know about you, but I like to be reminded of that. I think sometimes we forget, and it's a luxury to be able to forget. But I think to be reminded of what we went through, what we came through, what we survived, and also how lucky we are is important, because when you have kids and a house and a job and all that, you're just like, sometimes you're just putting one foot in front of the other, hoping to get to bed so you can watch some Netflix before passing out, you know, like, so I think it's nice that part of my history is being kind of brought back up a little bit.
Yeah. Every now and then someone says, I still have your album. I'm like, you own a CD player? Like, no, I don't, but I still have your album on the shelf. I'm like, oh, thank you very much. Or like, I just downloaded one of your songs from iTunes and I say, thank you for 16 cents. Enjoy the song. You know, here we are, whatever. But you're right. It is a wonderful reminder of how far we've come. And to all the people that are listening to the show that have gone through hell and back and that are happily still here, again, with good problems to have. I mean, I would even conjecture to say surviving a pandemic is still better than dying from cancer. So all things in perspective, personally and professionally. One last question for you, and I do want to have a second show because I think you and I could opine on parenting. You write for Parenting Magazine. Through the lens of your being a mom with 3 children, again, in 2020 during a pandemic, what, if any, has been 1 or 2 specific saving life hacks for you to balance all the insanity?
Okay, so there's a lot.
Pick
Open
2.
a bottle of wine.
Pick
No,
2,
I'm just kidding.
For sure.
I'm just kidding. So in addition to the don't put it down, put it away, which is it comes in a lot of handy around here, I would say the calm down before reacting, which is one of the life skills in the book from David G. He's a meditation expert, and he has this 16-second breath that I highly recommend. And you breathe in for whatever you're doing. You're stressed out before you're going to send an email, send a text, deal with your kids, go to dinner, whatever it is. You breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold the breath for 4 seconds, you breathe out for 4 seconds, and you hold the exhale for 4 seconds. And it's about interrupting the pattern in your brain, and it resets you. And it's just so important to be able to do that. And do I always do it? No. Do I forget sometimes? Yes. And just react. But I think, in the last 9 months, just there's been very little, alone time, private time, like time to have a conversation without being interrupted. So that take a deep breath before reacting has been really important. And then one just more practical thing that I love is Sync Zero, which is like inbox zero. And this comes from Rachel Hoffman. She's my tidy room expert, but she just says, like, try to get to Sync Zero at least one time a day. And I don't know about you, but we were cooking and cleaning like 85 times a day. Like, it's insane how much people need to eat. And when you're home during a pandemic, all you want to do is eat. The first 6 months, I feel like that's all we did. So there was a lot of kitchen cleaning, and this idea of Sync Zero that I always say to Nick at the end of the night, I'm like, we have to get to Sync Zero, because if you wake up in the morning and there's even 1 or 2 dishes in there, it just compounds throughout the day. And so I think the overall thing that has stuck with me during this time is just being considerate of my future self, like doing the hard thing right now, just a little bit, so that in the morning or the next day, my future self can wake up to an empty dishwasher and a cleaned out sink. So Sync Zero, calming breath, cheese boards, opening wine, all of it. I use it all.
And American cheese only on your cheeseburgers.
Yes, and put the thumbprint in. That's a good one to read, but he always puts a thumbprint into the burger patty before he cooks it so that it doesn't puff up. And then you have to push the spatula down, which you don't want to do because all the juices run out. So all sorts of little life hacks in the book that are more fun than getting your sink to Sync Zero. But I just love that. I love that idea of Sync Zero. And it's amazing how infrequent we get there.
Erin Zammett Ruddy, journalist, writer, blogger, speaker, advocate, philanthropist, awesome human being, and author of The Little Book of Life Skills, Deal with Dinner, Manage Your Emails, Make a Graceful Exit, and 152 other expert tricks. Thank you for this amazing reunion and for joining us here on Out of Patience.
Thank you so much. This was so fun. I can't wait to come back.
That's all for today, folks. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, follow us on social, and tell all your friends to listen. Out of Patience with Matthew Zachary is a product of Offscript Media. Our executive producer is Matthew Zachary. Our senior producers are Jen Horangeff and Andrew McDowell. Darren Tunn is our production intern. It is recorded, mixed, and edited by Matthew Zachary. Our theme music is by the Mike Van Allen Quintet and by Mara. For advertising and media inquiries, email media@offscript.com. Hit us up at contact@offscript.com to share comments, feedback, and make guest recommendations. For more information, visit offscript.com.